episode titled The Spider Pig Family. The morning began in a very unusual way. Peppa Pig woke up and stretched. Suddenly, a thin web shot out of her hand and stuck to the wardrobe. "Oh!" said Peppa. George woke up too. He stood up and suddenly found himself on the ceiling. "Dinosaur!" he said happily while crawling upside down. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig looked at each other. "It seems we have superpowers," said Mummy Pig. Peppa put on a mask. "We are now the Spider Pig family." George laughed and crawled across the ceiling. Daddy Pig tried too, but immediately slid down. "I almost did it," he said. At that moment, the television showed breaking news. "Attention! Mr. Fox has robbed a bank." Peppa turned to her family. "This is a job for us." They rushed outside. Peppa used her web to move forward. George crawled quickly along walls, and Daddy Pig tried to run, but sometimes got tangled in his own web. They arrived at the scene, but the police were already there. Officer Panda saw them. "Stop! You are the robbers!" he said. Daddy Pig tried to explain, but accidentally shot web and stuck it to a police car. "Arrest them!" said Officer Panda. The pig family was captured and placed in the police vehicle. "We are not robbers," said Peppa. "We need to find Mr. Fox," added Mummy Pig. Peppa looked at George. "Plan!" George crawled along the ceiling of the vehicle and opened the door. The family quietly escaped. "We have to prove we are heroes," said Peppa. They went to search for Mr. Fox. Soon they saw him with Mr. Bull trying to escape. "After them!" Peppa shouted. Peppa used her web to slow them down. George jumped from the wall to block their path, and Mummy Pig helped guide the plan. Daddy Pig got tangled again, but accidentally caught Mr. Bull. "I meant to do that," he said. Together, they wrapped the robbers in web. The police arrived. Officer Panda looked at them. "We are sorry. We made a mistake. You are real heroes." He shook their hands. "As a reward, we give you a supercar." The family got into the car. It was bright and fast. Suddenly, a new signal came through. "Emergency call!" Peppa smiled. "Let's go!" And the car sped off to help again. Episode titled The Strange Toy. It was a normal morning. Everything in the pig family house seemed calm. Mummy Pig was making breakfast. Daddy Pig was reading a newspaper. Peppa was talking about going outside. And George was sitting on the floor playing with his dinosaur. After breakfast, Peppa suggested walking near the forest. George took his dinosaur and they went outside. At first, the walk was fun. Peppa jumped along the path and George walked beside her quietly saying, "Dinosaur." Near the forest, Peppa saw butterflies and ran after them. George stayed alone for a moment beside an old tree. He wanted to pick up a small stick, but then he noticed something under the roots. It was a toy. The toy looked like George. It was small, with the same shape of head, and it even held a tiny dinosaur in its hands. But it looked old. There was dust on it, one eye was drawn slightly crooked, and its smile seemed too still. George picked it up and looked at it. The toy looked back. Peppa returned and asked what he had found. George showed her the toy. Peppa said it was strange and suggested leaving it in the forest. George placed the toy back under the tree. Then they went home. But when George entered the living room, the toy was already lying on the floor beside his dinosaur. Peppa was surprised. "Did you bring it home?" George shook his head. Mummy Pig said maybe he had simply forgotten. George felt uneasy. He picked up the toy and placed it inside a box of old things. The box was closed and put into the storage room. A few minutes later, George returned to the living room. The toy was lying in the same place again. Daddy Pig decided to take it outside. He placed the toy near the bin and closed the door. George watched from the window. The toy lay still, but when he blinked, it was gone. George slowly turned around. The toy was sitting on the sofa. That evening, George did not want to play. The toy stood on a shelf and seemed to be watching him. Peppa took it down and placed it in a drawer. The drawer was closed. But during the night, George woke up to a quiet knocking sound. He sat up in bed. The room was dark. The knocking came again. It was coming from the drawer. Then the drawer slowly opened by itself. In the morning, Mummy Pig found the toy on the kitchen table. Beside it was a small piece of paper. On it, written in uneven letters, were the words, "I am home." Daddy Pig said it was probably only a joke, but no one laughed. George held his dinosaur more tightly than usual. Later, Peppa decided to help. She took the toy, carried it back to the forest, and left it under the same old tree. Then she quickly returned home. George watched the door. An hour passed. Then a little more. The toy did not appear. Everyone began to feel calm again. In the evening, George went to the room he shared with Peppa. His dinosaur was lying on his bed, and beside it sat the toy. Now its smile was wider. George wanted to call Peppa, but the toy slowly tilted its head. A faint voice came from it, almost like George's own voice. Dinosaur! The next morning, everything looked ordinary. George sat on the floor and played. Peppa looked at him and noticed that he was silent. Then she saw the toy on the shelf. It was silent too. But now George and the toy had the same still smile. Episode titled The Snow Brother. It was a calm and ordinary morning. Mummy Pig was making breakfast, Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper, Peppa came downstairs and said, "Good morning," and George was sitting on the floor playing with his dinosaur. He quietly repeated "dinosaur" while moving the toy. Everything felt familiar. After breakfast, George went outside. At first, the weather seemed normal, but within minutes the sky darkened and a heavy snowfall began. The snow fell thick and fast, making it hard to see anything. George stopped. He held his dinosaur tighter and quietly said, "Dinosaur." Everything became quiet, as if the snow was absorbing all sound. George walked forward, but soon realized he did not recognize the path anymore. Everything around him looked the same, covered in white. He took a few more steps and suddenly saw a warm light ahead. He walked closer. There was a fire. Someone was sitting near it. George stopped. It was him, but different. A snow version of George. He was wearing a thick fur coat, a warm hat, and heavy mittens lay beside him. He looked calm, as if he had always lived there. He looked at George and nodded. Then he quietly said, "Dinosaur." His voice sounded slightly deeper, slower. George walked closer and sat near the fire. He felt warmer. The Snow Brother moved a piece of cloth closer to him, as if offering warmth. They sat in silence. Sometimes the Snow Brother added wood to the fire. He moved calmly and confidently, as if he knew this world well. George watched him and repeated "dinosaur." The Snow Brother sometimes answered, but slightly before George spoke. It felt strange, but not frightening. Then the Snow Brother looked at George and said, "It is quiet here." George said nothing. He watched the falling snow. It felt like time had stopped. Then the Snow Brother stood up. He pulled his coat tighter and said, "You will go back." George did not understand, but he stood